The stagecoach driver looked at her and said 5 words. "You will probably make it." Then he left her, alone, in a blizzard, 3 miles from a ranch she'd never seen, to marry a man she'd never met. Rose Caldwell had $9 sewn into her coat lining, a dead father's surgical instruments in her bag, and hands that shook every time she picked up a scalpel. Because the last time she cut into someone, it was her own father, and he bled for 3 days before he died. The rancher who found her freezing against the wrong building wasn't grateful she'd arrived. He was furious, because he'd already buried one woman on this ranch, and the coat Rose was now wearing, the coat that fit her perfectly, had belonged to his dead wife, a wife who left behind a secret hidden in the lining. A letter addressed to another man, a letter that read, "When the spring thaw comes, I am leaving." The man she was leaving for? He's now trying to burn the ranch to the ground, and Rose, the woman whose hands killed what they loved, is the only one who can save it. This story will show you that the hands that once failed you are the same hands that can save you. You just have to be brave enough to use them again. And that love isn't about finding someone who needs you. It's about finding someone who chooses you, even when they don't have to. Welcome to Cowboy Dusk channel, where the frozen trails of the frontier lead to stories of wounded hearts learning to heal, love that chooses to stay when everything says run, and the raw, beautiful courage of people who refuse to let their past decide their future. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. If this story left a mark on your heart, let us know. Hit like. Tell us in the comments which moment took your breath away. Share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances. And subscribe to Cowboy Dusk so these stories always find their way to you.
The last thing the stagecoach driver said to her before he left was this: "You will probably make it." Probably. It was not the cruelty of the word that Rose Caldwell would remember for the rest of her life. It was the accuracy. One moment she could see the rutted road through the frosted window of the coach. Brown earth cutting through white fields, fence posts standing like sentinels against a pale sky. The next moment, the world dissolved. Not slowly, not with any kind of warning a person could prepare for, but all at once, as if God had drawn a white curtain across the whole of Montana Territory and said, "That is enough of seeing where you are going." Wind hit the coach broadside. Rose grabbed the wooden seat with both hands as the whole contraption rocked on its springs hard enough to throw her shoulder against the wall. She was the only passenger. That should have been her first warning. When she had boarded in Helena that morning, the ticket clerk had given her a look she did not understand at the time. A quick flick of the eyes toward the sky, then back to her, then down to the $3.50 she laid on the counter. He had taken the money without comment. Everyone took the money without comment. That was how things worked when you were a woman alone with no one to speak on your behalf. The coach lurched to a stop so sudden, Rose slid forward on the bench and caught herself with her palms flat against the opposite seat. Through the frosted glass, she heard the driver climbing down from his perch. His boots hit snow that was already deep enough to crunch. Then his face appeared at the window. Old Pete, the other passengers in Helena had called him, though he could not have been more than 50. His skin was leather stretched over bone, creased and darkened by decades of wind and sun. His eyes held no apology whatsoever. "End of the line, miss," he said through the glass. Rose felt something cold settle in her stomach that had nothing to do with the weather. "We cannot be in Thornfield yet." The advertisement said 8 hours from Helena. "We are not in Thornfield." Pete did not bother opening the door. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the price of grain rather than abandoning a woman in the wilderness. "We are about 3 miles out. Storm is getting worse. Horses cannot make it through drifts this deep. You will have to walk the rest." "Walk." Rose pressed her hand against the cold glass. The words sat in the air between them like something absurd, like telling a person to swim across the ocean. Better than dying out here when the coach gets stuck and the horses freeze, Pete said. He was already turning away, already dismissing her. There is a ranch about a mile northeast. Big place. Cannot miss it if you follow the fence line. Tell Thorne I said you should have waited for better weather. Rose shoved the door open. The wind hit her like a fist. Not a gust, but a wall of force that drove tiny particles of ice into her skin like needles, found the gaps in her coat collar, stole the breath from her lungs before she could draw it fully. Snow was past her ankles already and building. "You cannot just leave me here," she said. But old Pete was back on his perch gathering the reins. He looked down at her one last time and something that might have been pity moved across his weathered face. Might have been. With men like Pete, it was hard to know for certain. "You got warm clothes?" Rose nodded, though her wool coat and traveling dress were made for Boston winters, which were a different animal entirely from whatever Montana had decided to throw at her today. "Then you will probably make it. Follow the fence posts. Do not stop moving, not even for a minute. You stop, you freeze. Simple as that." He clicked his tongue. The horses leaned into their harnesses. The coach lurched forward, wheels cutting through snow, and within seconds the dark shape of it had vanished into the white, swallowed, as completely as if it had never existed. Rose stood alone. She thought about Boston then. Not the city itself, but the room she had left behind. The narrow bed in the boarding house on Milk Street. The landlady, Mrs. Brennan, standing in the doorway with the eviction notice in her hand and not a drop of shame on her face. "1 week, Miss Caldwell. I am sorry for your circumstances, but I have others waiting for this room." Rose had sat on that narrow bed after Mrs. Brennan left and counted her money. $9. She had counted it 3 times to be sure, spreading the coins and bills across the threadbare blanket, hoping each time that she had miscounted that there was more hiding somewhere. But $9 was $9 no matter how many times you counted it. $9 in 7 days. She had found the advertisement on the 4th day, tucked in the back pages of the Boston Herald between notices for patent medicines and domestic servants wanted. Rancher in Montana Territory seeks educated woman for marriage. Must be practical, hardworking, and willing to adapt to frontier life. No romantic notions. This is a business arrangement. Reply to Wyatt Thorne, Thornfield Station, Montana Territory. No romantic notions. Rose had read that line twice and felt something like relief. She had no romantic notions left. Romantic notions required hope and energy and a belief that the world might be kind if you gave it the chance. And Rose Caldwell had run out of all 3 approximately 6 months ago when her father had died on the table where she was operating on his leg. The memory came sharp and unwanted. Her hands covered in blood, the scalpel that had slipped, her father's voice, weak and getting weaker. "Not your fault, Rossi girl." Rose shook her head hard. The ice on her eyelashes cracked and fell. She could not afford that memory right now. Right now she needed to walk. She picked up her traveling bag from where Pete had tossed it. The pathetic weight of everything she owned in the world. 2 dresses, 1 nightgown, her mother's silver brush, her father's veterinary instruments wrapped in oiled cloth, and $9 in coins sewn into the lining. $9 between her and starvation, between her and the kind of desperate poverty that destroyed women completely. 1 mile northeast. Follow the fence posts. Rose turned into the wind and began to walk. Her father had taught her the counting trick during the war when he had served as a cavalry veterinarian attached to the Army of the Cumberland. He had told her stories about winter campaigns, about soldiers who froze to death within sight of camp because they stopped moving, about horses that died standing up with ice in their veins. "The cold is patient, Rossi girl," he had said, his voice rough from the laudanum he needed for the pain in his leg. The wound from Chickamauga that had slowly killed him over 10 years, infection eating away at muscle and bone until there was nothing left but a ghost of the man he had been. It does not care if you are brave or scared, it just waits. And the moment you stop fighting, it takes you. So Rose counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. At 100, she allowed herself to stop for 3 seconds, just long enough to catch her breath and wipe the ice from her lashes. Then she started again. The world narrowed to white and cold in the desperate mechanical process of lifting one foot then the other. She could not see more than a few feet ahead, could not see fence posts or road or sky, just snow, horizontal sheets of it driven by wind that felt strong enough to knock her flat. At step 467, she found it, a dark vertical line cutting through the white, a fence post. Rose stumbled towards it and grabbed the rough wood with both hands like it was salvation itself. The post was solid and real, proof that human beings lived in this frozen hell and had built things that endured. She followed the fence line, one hand trailing along the wire strung between posts. The barbs cut through her glove in places, scoring her palm. But the pain was good. Pain meant she was alive. Pain meant she was still feeling. When the pain stopped, that was when the dying started. Her foot caught on something buried in the snow. She went down hard on both knees. Her traveling bag tumbled from numb fingers, rolling into a drift. Rose tried to grab it and missed. Everything she owned, disappearing into white. For a long moment she knelt in the snow, breathing hard, watching white particles settle on the dark wool of her coat. It would be so easy to stay here. So easy to close her eyes and let the cold do what the cold always did. She was tired. Tired of fighting and being afraid and the constant grinding hunger in her belly and the desperate calculations about how long $9 could last. She was utterly alone. Her father was dead, had been dead 6 months now, though the actual dying had taken years. Her mother was long gone, taken by cholera when Rose was 12. No siblings, no cousins. No one in the world who would notice if Rose Caldwell simply vanished into this white nothing. The strange warmth started then. The body is final lie before it shuts down. Rose recognized it from her medical training and knew exactly what it meant. Knew that the desire to lie down and sleep that was creeping through her limbs was not rest, but death, wearing a comfortable mask. She found the bag. It had not gone far. She hauled herself to her feet through will alone and kept walking. The gate appeared out of the white like something from a dream. Cross beams overhead, thicker posts than the fence line, a road beyond it leading somewhere that mattered. Rose turned through the gate and followed the road. The fence continued on her left. A shape emerged from the storm, solid and dark and blessedly rectangular. A building. Rose tried to run toward it, but her legs would not cooperate. She managed a stumbling walk, then fell against the wall. Rough-hewn logs chinked with mortar. A barn or a cabin. She did not care which. It was shelter. She felt along the wall until her clumsy frozen hands found a door, grabbed the handle, pulled with everything she had left. The door did not move. Rose pulled harder. Nothing. Locked or frozen shut or both. She pounded with fists she could no longer feel. "Help!" she screamed, but the wind tore the word away before it traveled a foot. "Somebody help me!" "I am freezing," she screamed again. Pounded until dark smears appeared on the wood that might have been blood from her torn gloves. She could not tell anymore, could not feel anything. "Please!" Her voice cracked. She slid down the door until she was kneeling in the snow. "I do not want to die out here." The cold wrapped around her like a blanket. Warm now. So warm. Her eyes began to close. Then a voice. From above her. From somewhere in the white. Miss Caldwell. He knew her name. He had been waiting for her. She tried to look up, could not make her neck work. A shape resolved from the storm, tall, broad-shouldered, covered in snow. A man dropping to his knees beside her. "Miss Caldwell, can you hear me?" She tried to answer, but her jaw was locked, teeth chattering so hard she bit her tongue, tasted blood, hot and metallic and alive. Strong hands gathered her up as if she weighed nothing. Rose found herself pressed against a chest that was warm, so warm it burned against her frozen skin. She registered fragments through ice-crusted lashes, leather and horse and pine. The steady thud of a heartbeat against her cheek, and his face, not worried, not pitying. Angry, he was furious with her. Rose could not understand why, could not make her frozen brain work through the logic of it. She had come to him as agreed. She had answered his advertisement and accepted his terms and traveled 2,000 miles across the country to this godforsaken, frozen place. And he was angry. Why? The question followed her down into darkness as her eyes closed, and the last thing she felt was the terrible, wonderful heat of his body carrying her through the storm. Wyatt Thorne had already buried one woman on this ranch. He had no intention of burying another. He had been in the horse barn checking on the pregnant mares when the sound came. At first he thought it was wind. Wind did strange things during a Montana blizzard, howled and screamed and beat against walls until it sounded almost human. He had learned years ago to ignore it. You started jumping at every gust. You would never sleep from November through March. But this sound came again, and again, a rhythmic pounding that wind did not make. Then a scream, thin and desperate and barely human, cut through with the kind of terror that comes only from a person who knows they are about to die. Wyatt ran. He found her crumpled against the door of the supply shed. Not even the main house. She had walked right past the cabin in the whiteout and fetched up against the wrong building entirely. Another 50 yards to the right, and she would have missed every structure on the property and walked straight into open prairie. They would have found her body in the spring. She was small. That was the first thing he registered when he lifted her. She weighed nothing. Less than nothing. And that scared him more than the blue tint of her lips, or the frost on her eyelashes, or the blood on her gloves. She weighed nothing, which meant she had not been eating properly, which meant wherever she came from, she had been starving before the blizzard ever started. This woman had been dying before she set foot in Montana. "Miss Caldwell," he said, "can you hear me?" She tried to look at him. Her neck would not cooperate. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. The chattering of her teeth was so violent her whole body shook with it. Anger hit him like a second blizzard. Not at her, though some small part of it was directed her way. Mostly at old Pete for abandoning a passenger in this storm. At himself for placing that goddamn advertisement in the first place. For reaching out across 2,000 miles and pulling another woman into this place that consumed women. This place that had consumed Anna. He carried her to the cabin, kicked the door open with his boot. The heat from the fire he had kept burning hit them both, and the woman in his arms gasped. A sound of pain. He knew that sound. The sudden return of warmth to frozen flesh was agony. He set her in the chair closest to the fire. Her eyes were crusted shut with ice. He brushed it away with his bare hands, as carefully as he could, feeling the terrible cold of her skin against the warmth of his palms. She flinched at his touch, not from pain, from the temperature difference. His hands must have felt like brands against her frozen face. "I am going to take off your coat," he said. "We need to get these wet clothes off you." She managed a nod. Small mercy that she was conscious enough to consent. He worked the buttons of her coat. His fingers brushed the skin of her throat where the collar met her neck. She was ice. Not cold like a person who had been outside too long. Cold like something that was not alive anymore, like stone or metal or the frozen ground. Both of them went still. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds. The contact of his warm skin against her frozen throat. The sudden awareness that passed between them that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the fact that he was touching a woman for the first time in 3 years, and she was letting him. Wyatt pulled back, turned away, busied himself with the kettle. His hands, which were steady enough to break a wild horse, were shaking. He brought her dry clothes from the chest in the back room. A cotton dress that had belonged to Anna, worn soft with age. Too large for this thin woman, but dry. He turned his back while she changed. Heard the wet slap of frozen fabric hitting the floor. The rustle of dry cloth being pulled on. Tried not to think about any of it. "Done," she said. Her voice was a whisper, raw and cracked. He turned back. She sat in Anna's dress by Anna's fire in Anna's chair, and something about the sight of it made his chest tighten in a way he had not expected. Not grief. Something more complicated than grief. "How are your fingers?" he asked. "Your toes? Can you feel them?" She wiggled her toes. Pain crossed her face, sharp enough to make her gasp. "They hurt," she said. "Good. Means no frostbite. If you could not feel them, we would have a real problem." He brought her tea, strong and sweet the way his mother used to make it when someone was sick. Rose took the mug in both hands and held it like it was the most precious thing she had ever been given. The first sip burned her tongue. She did not seem to care. "You are Wyatt Thorne," she said. "Not a question. I am. I am Rosemary Caldwell, though I go by Rose. I suppose you figured that out. Your letter said you would arrive next week. The clerk in Helena said there was space on today is stage. I thought it better to come early than to spend money on lodging while I waited." Wyatt looked at her. This woman who had nearly died to save a few dollars, who had walked through the worst blizzard in 5 years rather than wait for better weather. Desperation and practicality looked similar from the outside, but they came from very different places. "The driver said to tell you I should have waited," Rose added. "Old Pete, that sounds like him. Did he at least point you in the right direction before he left you to die?" "He said to follow the fence line, that there was a ranch about a mile northeast. 3 miles, actually, but close enough in a blizzard." He moved to the window. Could see nothing through the frost. "Storm is getting worse. You are lucky you made it. Another hour out there, and we would have been burying you come spring." Rose set down her tea with hands that still trembled. "I appreciate your bluntness, Mr. Thorne, but I was aware of the danger." "Were you?" He turned from the window, and those gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made something in her chest tighten. "Because from where I am standing, it looks like you made a foolish choice based on saving a few dollars. That is not practical. That is desperate." Color flooded her cheeks. Heat that had nothing to do with the fire or the tea. "And if I am desperate, does that change our arrangement?" "Number." His voice was flat, honest. "I asked for a practical woman. Desperation makes a person practical faster than anything else. But I need to know what I am dealing with. Your letters were vague about your circumstances." Rose lifted her chin. "My father died 6 months ago. He was a Union cavalry veterinarian during the war. Took a bullet in the leg at Chickamauga. The wound never properly healed. Infection set in, spread slowly over the years." She paused. "He lived on laudanum and willpower until both ran out." She did not say the rest. Not the surgery, not the scalpel, not the artery. She told the truth with a hole in the center, and she watched Wyatt accept it without knowing what was missing. "My mother died when I was 12. Cholera. After she passed, it was just Father and me. He taught me everything he knew about treating animals. Horses primarily, but also cattle, dogs, anything people brought him. I assisted with surgeries, deliveries, setting broken bones. By the time I was 16, I could handle most cases on my own. After he died, I took a clerk position at a textile factory. 30 cents a day. 3 months ago, the factory closed without warning. I sent 47 letters to potential employers. Not one reply." She met his eyes. "I had 1 week before my landlady put me out. $9 to my name. No family, no friends with means to help. So when I saw your advertisement, I answered, because the alternative was the streets, or worse." Silence filled the space between them. The fire crackled. Wind howled against the windows. Wyatt studied her with those winter-gray eyes, and Rose could not read what he was thinking. His face was carved from the same granite that formed the mountains outside, weathered and hard and giving nothing away. "That is honest," he said finally. "I appreciate that more than you might think." He poured himself coffee from the pot on the stove. Took a long drink before continuing. "I will be equally honest with you, Miss Caldwell. I am 32 years old. I own this ranch free and clear. 200 horses, 6,000 acres of grazing land. I breed quarter horses primarily for cavalry contracts. Business is good. Not wealthy, but comfortable. He paused, set down his cup. Built this place with a friend. He is not a friend anymore. He did not elaborate. His jaw tightened and the subject closed as firmly as a door. I was married before. Her name was Anna. She died 3 years ago, in childbirth. The baby, a son, was stillborn. The words came out flat, practiced, like he had said them enough times that the edges had worn smooth. But Rose heard what was underneath. Not smooth at all, jagged and still bleeding. I am sorry, she said, and meant it. So am I. He looked at her directly. I will not make promises I cannot keep. I will not tell you I will love you because I do not know if I am capable of that anymore. But I will treat you fairly. You will have your own room, your own space. I will not force intimacy you do not want. This is a business arrangement, exactly as I said in my letter. Partnership, not romance. I understand, Rose said. Do you? Because you need to know what you are agreeing to. This ranch is isolated. Nearest neighbor is 5 miles, town is 12. In winter, we might not get there for weeks. The work is constant. The weather is brutal. And I am not an easy man to live with. Anna made that clear enough. And yet you are offering me a choice, Rose said quietly. You could have simply married me the moment I arrived. The law would support you. But instead you are telling me the truth and giving me the option to refuse. That suggests you are more decent than you are admitting. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or discomfort at being seen clearly. The stagecoach will not run again until the storm passes, he said. Could be days. You will stay here until then. If you decide this is not what you want, I will pay your passage back to Helena and give you enough money for a fresh start somewhere else. $50. Rose looked around the cabin while he spoke. A woman's touch was everywhere. Curtains on the windows, lace-edged, carefully made. A tablecloth with embroidered corners. A dried wildflower on the windowsill, preserved in a small glass bottle. Handmade soap by the wash basin. The ghost of Anna was in every corner of this room. But there were no photographs. Not one image of the woman who had filled this house with her presence. Every trace of her remained, except her face. Rose filed that detail away. A man who kept everything his dead wife had touched but removed her picture. That meant something. She did not yet know what. I do not need time to decide, Rose said. I'm staying. I am. Wyatt studied her for a long moment, then spoke in a voice that carried something heavier than the words themselves. You should think about it. People who decide to stay on this ranch, not all of them last. It sounded like he was talking about Anna. But underneath, Rose heard something deeper, as though he was not talking about anyone else at all, as though he was talking about himself. Later, after Wyatt had shown her to the small room at the top of the stairs and left her alone, Rose sat on the narrow bed and let the shaking come. Delayed reaction, hitting all at once. She wrapped her arms around herself and breathed through it. A knock came at the door. Not Wyatt. A different voice. Older, rougher. Hank Dawson, ma'am, foreman. Just bringing up some extra blankets. Rose opened the door. The man who stood there was perhaps 55, with a face that looked like it had been left out in the weather for every one of those years. He handed her 2 wool blankets without ceremony. Thank you, Mr. Dawson. He nodded, turned to go, then stopped. Ma'am, I do not know what brought you here, and it is not my business. But if you are staying, you should know that some questions around this place do not have easy answers. And some names are better left alone until you have been here long enough to understand why. Rose waited. What names? Hank looked at her with eyes that had seen too much. Do not ask about Clayton Burch. Not yet. Then he walked down the stairs and left her standing in the doorway with 2 blankets and a name she could not stop thinking about. The gelding with the abscess was not the test. Rose knew that. The real test was the way Wyatt Thorne stood in the barn doorway, arms crossed, silent, and the way those gray eyes did not miss a single movement of her hands. Morning came gray and cold. The blizzard had broken sometime before dawn, leaving behind a world buried in white. Snow lay in drifts high as Rose's waist in places, sculpted by wind into strange, beautiful shapes that looked like they belonged on the moon rather than in Montana. The sky was that particular shade of iron that promised more snow later, and the cold was sharp enough to make her lungs ache with the first breath she took outside. Wyatt had coffee and bacon ready when she came downstairs. He slid a plate across the table without commentary. More food than Rose had seen in a single meal in weeks. She forced herself to eat slowly, not to wolf it down like the starving woman she was. Wyatt ate in silence across from her, and Rose appreciated that he did not feel the need to fill every moment with conversation. After breakfast, he handed her a coat from the peg by the door, heavy wool, fur-lined, well-made and recently cleaned, but clearly not new. These were Anna's, he said. They should fit well enough. Rose took the coat. It fit perfectly, not approximately, not close enough, perfectly. As though Anna had been her exact size, her exact shape. She slipped her arms into sleeves that another woman had worn and felt a strange chill that had nothing to do with temperature, like stepping into another woman's skin. "Stay close," Wyatt said as they headed toward the barn. "Paths are treacherous when you cannot see what is underneath." He broke trail through snow that came past his knees. Rose followed in his footsteps, grateful for the path he carved. Inside the barn, the temperature was only slightly warmer, but at least they were out of the wind, and the smell was familiar. Horses and hay and leather, and the faint, sharp scent of liniment. The smell of her father's work. "I have got 20 mares," Wyatt said, moving down the center aisle. 12 are bred, due to foal starting in March. The others are young stock not ready yet. Rose walked slowly along the stalls, letting the horses get used to her. Some stretched their necks to sniff her. Others ignored her. A few pinned their ears, warning her back. She noted each reaction automatically, reading body language the way her father had taught her. A horse's ears told you everything you needed to know about its state of mind if you paid attention. In the 4th stall, she found it. A 3-year-old gelding favoring his left front leg. The horse shifted its weight when Rose approached, lifting the foot slightly off the ground. Classic presentation. "This one," Rose said. "How long has he been lame?" Wyatt frowned. "About a week. I have been resting him, but it is not improving." Rose entered the stall slowly, letting the gelding see her, smell her. She ran her hands down the leg, feeling for heat and swelling. Found both in the hoof. She picked up the foot and examined the sole carefully, pressing with her thumbs until the horse flinched. "Abscess," she said. "Deep one by the look of it. Needs to be drained or it will turn septic. Can you do it?" Rose set down the hoof and met his eyes. "I can. But I will need my instruments from my bag and good light." 30 minutes later, the gelding was cross-tied in the barn aisle and Rose's father's surgical kit was laid out on a clean towel. The instruments gleamed in the lantern light. Hoof knife, scalpel, probe, forceps. She had cleaned and oiled them every week since her father's death, maintaining them with the same care he had, even during the months when she had no use for them, even during the months when the sight of them made her want to vomit. She picked up the hoof knife. Her hand shook. Not a lot. Not enough for most people to notice. But Wyatt was watching. And behind him in the barn doorway, she could see the foreman, Hank, and a young ranch hand she had not met yet, both watching too. Rose breathed, closed her eyes for half a second. The memory was right there, pressing against the backs of her eyelids, blood pulsing from a severed artery, her father's face going gray. The scalpel that had slipped because her hands were shaking just like this. She opened her eyes, steadied her grip, and cut. The procedure took 12 minutes. Rose worked with the kind of focused concentration that blocked out everything, the watching eyes, the cold, the trembling that had started in her hands and now lived only in her memory. She lanced the abscess, drained the infection, packed the wound with poultice, and wrapped it clean. The gelding stood still through most of it, flinching only once when the initial incision released the pressure. When she finished, the horse was already moving more comfortably. The relief was immediate. He put weight on the foot without hesitation. Rose cleaned her instruments and repacked the kit. Her hands were steady now. Whatever demon had gripped them at the start had let go once the work began. "He will need the poultice changed twice daily for a week," she told Wyatt. "Keep the hoof dry. He should be sound in 10 days. Behind her, she heard Hank mutter to the young hand. Hands shook when she started, steady as granite once she cut. Strange. Rose heard it. She felt the blood drain from her face. She said nothing, kept her eyes on the instruments as she wrapped them in oiled cloth. The young hand was Billy Reed, 19 years old, sandy-haired, with a grin that seemed permanently attached to his face and a curiosity that bordered on reckless. He appeared at Rose's elbow as she was packing up. "That was something," he said. "I never seen anyone lance an abscess that clean. How did you know exactly where to cut?" "Anatomy," Rose said. "You need to understand the structure underneath, where the blood vessels run, where the tendons attach. Cut in the wrong place and you do more damage than the original injury. And you learned all that from your father. Every night for 8 years, he would quiz me over dinner, make me recite bone structures and muscle groups until I could do it in my sleep." Billy shook his head, impressed. "Wish someone had taught me that way." Later that morning, Wyatt took Rose out to check the far pastures. This required riding, and riding was where Rose's competence ended. She was a veterinarian's daughter, not a horsewoman. She knew how a horse worked from the inside. She knew anatomy and physiology and pharmacology. She could diagnose a dozen conditions by touch alone. But actually sitting on top of a horse and making it go where she wanted was an entirely different skill. She gripped the saddle horn with both hands and bounced out of rhythm with every step. Billy, riding behind them, covered his mouth with his hand, but the laugh escaped anyway. Even Wyatt's mouth twitched. Then Wyatt rode alongside her, reached across, put his hand on her waist, brief and professional, adjusting her posture in the saddle, pushing her weight down into her heels, correcting the angle of her spine. "Sit deeper," he said. "Stop fighting the motion. Let your hips follow the horse." His hand lingered half a second longer than necessary. Rose felt the warmth of his palm through the coat, through Anna's coat. Both of them seemed to realize it at the same time. Wyatt withdrew his hand. Rose adjusted her grip. Behind them, Billy suddenly remembered he needed to check the south fence and turned his horse around with a speed that had nothing to do with fences. They rode in silence after that. Rose concentrated on not falling off. Wyatt concentrated on whatever Wyatt concentrated on when he went quiet, which seemed to be most of the time. That afternoon, Tom Bradley came to visit. He arrived on a sturdy bay gelding, a solid man in his 50s with kind eyes and the calloused hands of someone who had worked every day of his life. He shook Rose's hand firmly when Wyatt introduced her. "Pleasure, ma'am. Heard Wyatt had sent for someone. Glad to see you made it through that storm." "Barely," Rose said. Tom laughed. "That is how most things work out here. Barely." He stayed for coffee and conversation, filling in pieces of the world Rose had entered. The neighboring ranches, the town of Thornfield, the rhythms of life in Montana Territory. He spoke easily and warmly, and Rose found herself relaxing in his presence, in a way she had not relaxed since arriving. "Wyatt was different before Anna passed," Tom said at one point, almost offhandedly. His eyes on the coffee in his cup, laughed more. There was a lightness to him. Now, he shrugged. Not so much. He looked up at Rose with an expression that was kind but also measuring. "Maybe you will change that. Or maybe this place will change you first." After Tom left, after supper, after Wyatt had retreated to whatever part of the house he retreated to in the evenings, Rose found herself at the bookshelf, Anna's books. 3 volumes on equine anatomy and disease. Rose pulled one down and opened it. The pages were worn soft from handling. In the margins, she found notes in a feminine hand. Questions, observations, small sketches of bone structure that showed genuine effort to understand. Anna had tried, really tried to learn this world her husband lived in. Rose turned pages slowly, reading Anna's thoughts. A woman's mind laid bare in pencil marks. Intelligent questions, careful observations. Someone who wanted to understand but struggled with the reality of blood and mess and suffering. She reached the last page and stopped. The handwriting here was different. Not the careful, measured notes of the other pages. This was scrawled, shaking, written in obvious distress. He would not take me. God help me, he would not take me. Rose closed the book. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She sat very still for a long time, staring at the closed cover, those words burning behind her eyes. When did Anna write this? And what did she mean? Take her where? Away from the ranch, to town, to a doctor. Rose put the book back on the shelf with hands that trembled, went upstairs to her room, lay in the narrow bed, and did not sleep for a very long time. Outside, the wind picked up again, howling across the prairie. And inside, Rose Caldwell's mind. A dead woman's desperate words circled like wolves in the dark. Wyatt knew Rose had found the book. He knew because this morning she would not look him in the eye, and the absence of her gaze felt like a wound he had not known he could still receive. She had come downstairs at dawn, as usual, had gone straight to the stove and attempted breakfast, which was a thing she did now, despite the fact that her cooking was an affliction upon everyone who encountered it. The eggs were scorched black on the bottom and raw on top somehow simultaneously. The coffee was thick enough to stand a spoon in and bitter enough to strip paint. The bread she had attempted was less bread and more a weapon of moderate destructive capability. Wyatt ate every bite. He also drank 4 cups of water in quick succession, which he hoped was subtle. It was not subtle. Hank, who had the social graces of a fence post and roughly the same level of tact, said from the doorway where he was pulling on his boots, "You can cut open a horse cleaner than anyone I have seen, Mrs. Thorne, but I would keep you away from the stove." Rose laughed. It came out sudden and surprised, like a bird startled from a bush. A real laugh, unguarded and bright, as though she had forgotten she was capable of producing such a sound. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Wyatt stopped chewing. He stared at her. He had not heard a woman laugh in this house in 3 years. Anna had laughed sometimes early on, before the isolation ground her down, before the winters turned her quiet and then angry, and then simply sad. But this laugh was different. This laugh did not know it was being watched. It was honest. Something happened in Wyatt's chest that he was not ready to name. He looked down at his plate, continued chewing, did not mention it. But all morning long, as he worked with the yearlings in the round pen, he kept hearing it. That laugh. Brief and unexpected, and doing something to the locked rooms inside him that he had nailed shut after Anna died. He had grown used to Rose's presence, and he did not know when that had happened. The footsteps on the stairs in the morning, the soap smell when she walked past, the way she tilted her head when she was listening, really listening, giving whatever you said her full attention, the methodical way she laid out her instruments before working, each tool in its exact place, a ritual that spoke of training so deep it had become instinct. He noticed these things. He did not want to notice them. But he did. She would not look at him today. That was new. Since arriving, she had always met his eyes directly, almost confrontationally. A woman accustomed to being underestimated who had learned to compensate with eye contact. Today she looked everywhere, except at him. The book. She had found the book. Wyatt had left Anna's veterinary texts on the shelf because he thought they contained only medical notes. He had never read the margins, never turned to the last page, had not known what Anna had written there. But whatever Rose had read, it had changed something. The warming between them, tentative and careful as it was, had stopped. She was polite now, distant, professional. The wall she had begun to lower was back up reinforced, and he felt the loss of it like a cold draft through a room that had just been getting warm. Around 10 in the morning, hoofbeats in the yard. Tom Bradley, and the look on his face was enough to make Wyatt's stomach drop. "My mare, Betsy," Tom said before he was fully off his horse. His face was gray. "She's been colicking since before dawn. She is down, Wyatt, will not get up. I have tried everything I know." Rose appeared at the barn door. She had heard Tom's voice and was already holding her instrument bag. The transformation was immediate. Whatever personal distress she carried vanished, replaced by the focused calm of a practitioner faced with an emergency. Her eyes were clear, her jaw was set. "Where is she?" Rose asked. "My place. About 5 miles east. I will come now." Rose grabbed a horse and swung up into the saddle, or tried to. Her foot missed the stirrup and she nearly fell. Billy caught her elbow. Wyatt, without a word, stepped forward and tightened the cinch she had forgotten to check. His hands brushed her knee. Neither acknowledged it. They rode hard for Tom's ranch. 5 miles across snow-covered fields, the horses blowing steam, hooves punching through the crust. Rose rode better today, Wyatt noticed. She was too focused on the emergency to be self-conscious about her riding, and somehow that freed her body to find the rhythm it kept missing when she was thinking about it. They did not speak during the ride. The silence between them was thick with everything that had changed since yesterday. Wyatt wanted to ask what she had read, wanted to explain, though he was not sure what he would explain or how. With Anna, every conversation had ended in argument. He had forgotten how to talk to a woman about anything that mattered. Or perhaps he had never known. Perhaps that had always been the problem. Tom's ranch was smaller than Wyatt's. The barn was older but clean and well-maintained. Betsy was in a box stall, lying on her side, breathing hard. Her belly was distended, her flanks slick with sweat despite the cold. Rose could see the pain in every line of the mare's body. She dropped to her knees, hands moving immediately. Elevated heart rate, pale gums, gut sounds absent, sounds. All signs of severe colic. "When did she last pass manure?" Rose asked. "Yesterday morning. Nothing since. She's been trying to roll, constantly." Rose pressed her ear against the mare's belly. Silence. In a healthy horse, the gut was constantly active, rumbling and gurgling as food moved through the digestive tract. This silence meant everything had stopped. "Impaction," Rose said. "Severe. Complete blockage of the large colon. I need warm water, mineral oil, a bucket, and every towel you have. Now." Tom ran. Rose continued her examination. Palpated the abdomen. Found what she was looking for. A hard mass in the left ventral colon. Large. Immovable. Rose tubed the mare first. Passed a long rubber tube through the nostril and down into the stomach. Betsy fought, but Wyatt held her head steady, his voice low and soothing, his hands gentle. Rose worked the tube with practiced movements and began pouring mineral oil, gallon after gallon. Then came the hard part. Manual manipulation of the impaction through the abdominal wall. Rose stripped off her coat, rolled up her sleeves, pressed her hands deep into the mare's belly and began to work. And then her hands stopped. 5 seconds. 5 seconds where Rose Caldwell was not in a barn in Montana. She was in a room in Boston. August, her father's leg on the table, the scalpel in her hand, the blade catching the femoral artery. Blood. So much blood. Her father's eyes finding hers. "Not your fault, Rossi girl." She could not move. Her hands were on Betsy's belly and she could not make them work. The past had reached through time and grabbed her by the wrists. Wyatt saw it. He did not understand what was happening. But he recognized the look. He had seen it in soldiers. The 1,000-yard stare that came when the mind left the present and went somewhere terrible. Somewhere where the sounds and smells and feelings of a past horror became more real than the room you were standing in. He put his hand on her shoulder. Not her arm, not her back. her shoulder where the muscle was rigid with tension. His hand was warm. "You are here," he said quietly. "Not there. Here." Rose blinked, drew a breath that shuddered through her whole body, looked down at her hands on Betsy's belly. The mare groaned beneath her. She pressed harder, found the soft spot in the impaction, worked at it with everything she had. The mass began to break apart. Slowly, grudgingly. Rose worked in circles, steady pressure, her arms burning with effort. 15 minutes. 20. Sweat dripped down her face. Gut sounds returned. Faint at first, then stronger. The beautiful rumbling of intestines beginning to work. 10 minutes later, Betsy passed manure. Then more. Tom Bradley made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. The mare lifted her head, looked around. Her breathing eased. The pain lines around her eyes softened. Rose sat back on her heels. Her arms trembled with exhaustion, but it was done. The mare would live. Tom was crying openly. "You saved her. God above you saved my Betsy." "The oil saved her," Rose said, though she knew that was only partly true. The ride back was quiet. Stars were coming out, hard and bright in the cold sky. Their horses walked side by side, breath making clouds in the dark air. Rose's body ached. Her mind was still somewhere between Montana and Boston. "My father died because of me," she said. The words fell into the silence between them. She had not planned to say them. They came out on their own, pulled by something she did not understand. Perhaps it was the surgery, the memory that had ambushed her. Perhaps it was the darkness that made confession easier. Wyatt did not respond for a long time, long enough that Rose thought he had not heard or had chosen to ignore it. Then he spoke. "Tell me." "Not the thing everyone said. Not, it was not your fault, or I'm sure that is not true. Just tell me." An invitation, not a judgment. Rose was not ready. Not yet. The full truth was still too raw, too dangerous. But she gave him a peace. "Not yet. But thank you for not saying what I do not need to hear." More silence. The horses walked on. Somewhere a coyote called, high and lonely, and another answered from farther away. The sound made Rose shiver in a way that had nothing to do with cold. Back at Tom's ranch, while Rose was packing her instruments, Tom pulled Wyatt aside. The older man's face was serious. "She nearly froze in the middle of that surgery," Tom said quietly. "I saw it. 5 seconds where she was gone. Completely gone. She has got more skill in those hands than any vet I have known in 30 years, Wyatt. But something is haunting her. She needs someone to believe in her. Do not leave her alone with that fear." Wyatt said nothing, but he heard it. When they arrived back at the cabin, it was fully dark. Rose went straight upstairs. Wyatt went to the kitchen, intending to stoke the fire for the night. Anna's veterinary book was open on the kitchen table. The last page. He read the scrawl, and his face went white. He sat down, put his head in his hands. The fire crackled beside him. The wind pushed against the windows. She had written this. Anna had written this before she died. "He would not take me. God help me, he would not take me." He knew exactly what it meant. And Rose had read it. Rose waited 3 days. 3 days of Wyatt saying nothing about the book, nothing about Anna, nothing beyond what the work required. "Pass the salt. Storm coming tomorrow. That gelding is moving better." The kind of necessary words that two people exchange when they are avoiding everything that matters. The silence was louder than any argument. Rose worked. She examined every horse on the property, made notes on each one, established baselines she could use for future reference. She found a mare with the beginnings of navicular disease that would need special shoeing, and a 3-year-old filly with a chronic cough that suggested heaves. She began treatment plans using knowledge her father had drilled into her across 8 years of apprenticeship. She also learned to throw a lasso, which was to say she learned all the ways a lasso could go wrong. Billy had offered to teach her during a break between chores. The theory was simple. Swing the loop, release at the right moment, and catch whatever you were aiming at. The practice was humiliating. Her first 3 attempts landed in the dirt at her feet. The fourth caught Billy's boot and yanked him off balance. He hopped around the yard yelping while even Hank, who smiled approximately twice a year, allowed his mouth to twitch. Rose grinned. A real grin, not the careful, controlled smile she usually offered. She looked up and caught Wyatt standing in the barn doorway. Not smiling. Something more complicated than a smile. Something that looked like a man seeing something he had forgotten existed. At night, Rose lay awake and listened to the coyotes. They called to each other across the dark, high, wavering howls that seemed to carry all the loneliness of the open prairie in their throats. She had never heard anything like it in Boston. The sound made her feel small and far from everything she had known. But not in a bad way. In a way that suggested maybe being small and far from everything was not the worst thing a person could be. She could smell sage through the window she had left cracked open. The snow was melting in patches, and the earth underneath was breathing out its stored summer scent. She breathed it in and thought, this place smells like nothing in Boston. Like the ground itself is alive. On the third night, it was Wyatt who broke first, not by speaking, by crisis. A yearling had gotten tangled in barbed wire at the far eastern fence. Billy found the horse at dusk, thrashing against wire that was wrapped around both hind legs. The more the animal fought, the deeper the barbs cut. Wyatt and Rose rode out together in the dark. Just the two of them. The emergency was too urgent to wait for daylight and the location too far from the barn to walk. They worked by lantern light. Rose sedated the yearling with a tincture from her kit while Wyatt held the horse steady. Then she began cutting wire, carefully, strand by strand, unwinding it from legs that were already slick with blood. Wyatt held the lantern close. Their shoulders touched as they leaned over the same wound. The intimacy of shared labor in the dark. Their breath visible in the cold. The horse breathing between them, its panic fading as the tincture took hold. Rose sutured the deepest lacerations. Her hands were steady now. They always steadied once the work began. It was only the moment before the first cut that they betrayed her. Only the moment when memory had its chance to strike. She spoke without looking up from the suture. Hands moving, needle pulling thread through flesh. My father died on my table. I was operating on his leg. The infection had spread to bone. I was debriding necrotic tissue around the tibia. My hand slipped. The needle kept moving, in and out, precise, even stitches. I cut the femoral artery. He bled. For 3 days he bled. Too weak for another surgery. Too far gone for pressure alone to stop it. He died because my hand was not steady enough to save him. Silence except for the yearling's breathing and the wind. His last words were, "Not your fault." But I know what my hands did. I know the difference between a clean cut and a mistake. And I have been carrying that ever since. She was not asking Wyatt to confess. She was saying, I am wounded in the same place you are. You are not alone in this. The lantern flickered. Shadows moved across the snow. Wyatt was very still for a long time. Then he spoke. Anna went into labor 2 weeks early. The worst blizzard we had seen in 10 years. Worse than the one you walked through. She begged me to drive her to town, 12 miles to the doctor. I said no, too dangerous. The storm would kill us on the road. His voice was steady, the steadiness of a man who had rehearsed these words in his head 1,000 times but never spoken them aloud. I was right about the storm. We would have died on that road. But Anna delivered breach, too much blood, no one who could help. By the time the storm broke, it was over, both of them. She looked at me at the end, not angry. That would have been easier. She was not angry. She understood. She knew I had made the only rational choice, and she forgave me for it. And that... Wyatt's voice cracked. A single fracture in the stone. That was the worst part. I would rather she had been furious. Fury I could have fought. Forgiveness just sits there. Just lives in you like a second heartbeat that never stops. Rose set down the needle, looked at him across the horse's body. Lantern light caught his eyes, and she saw them clearly for the first time without any wall between them. Gray and deep, and carrying 3 years of a grief he had never shared with anyone. "You and I," she said. "We are the same. We both believe our hands killed the person we loved most." Wyatt's tears came silently. He did not sob, did not make a sound. Just tears running down a weathered face in the lantern light. Rose said nothing. She placed her hand over his on the yearling's flank. His hand was warm, hers was cold. He turned his palm up and closed his fingers around hers. They stayed that way for a long time, two people touching without pulling away. Cold night, warm horse, the scent of blood and sage and melting snow. When they finally stood and gathered the lantern and mounted their horses, something had shifted between them that could not be undone. Not romance, not love, not yet. But the wall that stood between them had a door in it now, and they had both walked through. They rode back in silence. Comfortable silence this time, the kind shared by people who have seen each other clearly and not looked away. At the cabin door, Rose turned to go upstairs. Wyatt's voice stopped her. "Rose, do not leave the ranch." She looked back. "I am not going anywhere." "No." He hesitated. "I mean, do not leave the ranch alone. Not because of the weather." His face was grave in the lamplight. "Clayton Burch came to see me last week," he said, "and he asked about you." Rose felt something cold move through her that had nothing to do with the night air. "Who is Clayton Burch?" Wyatt's jaw tightened. "He is the man Hank warned you about, and he is the reason I keep a rifle by the door." Clayton Burch had once been the only man on earth Wyatt Thorne trusted completely. 10 years ago, they had shared whiskey under a Montana sky and sworn to build an empire side by side. 9 years ago, Anna stepped off a stagecoach in Thornfield, and everything between them began to die. Wyatt remembered it with the kind of clarity that pain preserves. Clayton young and laughing, the kind of man who drew people to him without trying, generous with his money and his time. The kind of man who would take a knife in a saloon fight to protect a friend and laugh about the scar afterward. They had ridden into Montana territory together, staked claims side by side, built their ranches with shared labor and shared dreams. Then Anna, a schoolteacher from Philadelphia who arrived to teach at the new school in Thornfield. Dark hair, quick smile, a laugh that made you want to tell jokes just to hear it again. Clayton had seen her first, had loved her first, had loved her with the kind of quiet, devoted intensity that did not know how to speak itself aloud. But Anna had chosen Wyatt. Clayton never said a word about it, not one word. He stood at the wedding and raised his glass and smiled, and Wyatt had seen his eyes, had seen what lived behind that smile, and the friendship cracked like river ice in spring. Slow, and then all at once. After Anna died, the crack became a canyon. Clayton blamed Wyatt, not publicly, not in so many words, but in the way he stopped coming by, stopped sharing news or trading help during roundup, started buying land between their properties like a man building a wall. And now, Clayton was back. Not as a friend, as something else entirely. He rode into the yard on a Tuesday afternoon, well-dressed despite the cold, expensive coat, polished boots, a face that would have been handsome if not for the calculating coldness that had settled into his eyes like ice forming over a pond. "Wyatt," he said, dismounting, "been too long." Wyatt had been mucking stalls. He set down the pitchfork and walked to the yard, did not offer his hand. "Clayton, what brings you to my property? Can a neighbor not pay a friendly visit? We are not friends. State your business or leave." Clayton laughed. There was no humor in it, still direct as ever. "Very well. I will be blunt. I want to buy your ranch." Wyatt crossed his arms. "The ranch is not for sale. Everything is for sale at the right price. I am prepared to offer $12,000. Clayton looked around the yard as he spoke. His eyes traveled to the cabin, through the window. And something in his face changed. A flicker so brief anyone else would have missed it. But Wyatt had known this man for 10 years, and he saw it. pain. Raw, unguarded pain. There and gone in the space of a breath. "You still have her curtains up," Clayton said quietly. "That is not your concern, Clayton." The mask was back, the calculating smile, the cold eyes. But Rose had seen it too. She was standing in the barn doorway. She had heard the entire conversation. "Your bank loan," Clayton continued, $3,000 due in 6 weeks. My brother-in-law is the bank president. He tells me everything. Did you think I would not find out? The loan will be paid on time. Will it?" Clayton produced a cigar and lit it with deliberate slowness. "Because from where I stand, you are cutting it close. And if you default, the bank forecloses. At which point I buy the property for a fraction of what I'm offering now. Then you will be disappointed. Because I'm not defaulting." Clayton drew on the cigar. Considered. "I need this land, Wyatt. The railroad is coming through next year. Your property sits right in the path of the most profitable route. With your ranch and mine combined, I stand to make over $50,000. Then find another route. There is no other route, not one that makes financial sense." Clayton's voice hardened. "Be reasonable. Take my offer. 12,000 is more than enough to start over somewhere else." "I do not want to start over somewhere else. This is my home. This is Anna's grave, you mean?" The words were deliberately cruel. "She is dead, Wyatt. Holding on to this place will not bring her back." Wyatt's hands curled into fists. The muscle in his jaw jumped. But his voice when he spoke was deadly calm. "Get off my property. Now!" That was when Rose stepped out of the barn. She walked into the yard with the particular kind of calm that comes from a woman who has made a decision and is not interested in being talked out of it. She looked at Clayton Burch the way she looked at a sick horse. Evaluating, assessing, not afraid. "I do not believe we have met," she said. "I am Rose Caldwell Thorne." Clayton's eyebrows rose. He looked her up and down with the frank appraisal of a man accustomed to measuring the value of things. "So this is the mail order bride. And you must be the old friend," Rose said. Something moved behind Clayton's eyes. A flinch. She knew about him. He had not expected that. "I heard your offer," Rose continued. "The ranch is not for sale." Clayton studied her. "You have been here 3 weeks. What could you possibly know about this place? Enough to know you did not come here for the land." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Clayton stared at Rose. Rose stared back. Two people recognizing something dangerous in each other. Then Clayton dropped his cigar in the snow and ground it out with his heel. "Think about my offer. You have 6 weeks. He mounted his horse and rode away without looking back. The moment he was out of sight, Wyatt turned on Rose. His face was tight with something she had not seen directed at her before. Not anger exactly. Fear. The kind of fear that comes out sideways as anger because a man does not know what else to do with it. "You should not have stepped in," he said. "You do not know how dangerous he is." Rose felt heat rise in her chest. "If you want me as a partner, treat me like one. If you want me quiet in the kitchen, you married the wrong woman." "I did not want you to," Wyatt started. "You did not what? Want a wife with opinions. Should have put that in the advertisement." She walked past him into the barn. Wyatt stood alone in the yard. After a moment, he went inside the cabin and shut the door. Hard. The first real fracture between them. Hank found Rose in the barn 20 minutes later. She was brushing a mare with more force than was strictly necessary. The old foreman leaned against the stall door and was quiet for a while. Hank was good at quiet. Better than most people were at talking. "Clayton Burch was in love with Anna," Hank said finally. Rose's hand stilled on the brush. "You should know that. Changes everything, does it not?" Rose said nothing. But yes, it changed everything. That evening after supper, after the strained silence that had replaced conversation between her and Wyatt, Rose sat in her room and reached into the pocket of Anna's coat. She had been wearing the coat daily. It was warm and well-made, and it fit her perfectly. She'd gotten into the habit of sliding her hands into the pockets for warmth. Her fingers touched paper. She had not noticed it before. A small fold in the lining, almost invisible. An envelope, yellowed with age, unsealed, written on the front in a steady, feminine hand. Clayton. Rose pulled the letter out, held it in her hands. She knew she should not read it, knew this was private, a dead woman's correspondence with a man who was not her husband. She read it. Clayton. I have made my decision. When the spring thaw comes, I am leaving. I will take the eastbound stage to Helena and meet you there. I know what this means. I know what I'm giving up. But I cannot breathe here, and Wyatt will not leave, and I cannot keep dying slowly in a place that was never meant for me. I loved him. I think part of me always will. But love is not enough when every day feels like drowning. Rose sat on her bed for a very long time. The letter trembled in her hands. Anna had been planning to leave Wyatt, to go to Clayton, the man who loved her silently, the man she had apparently loved back. She never sent the letter. She discovered the pregnancy before spring came, stayed for the baby, died before she could leave. Wyatt did not know. Clayton did not know. The dead woman's most private truth was sitting in Rose's hands, and the weight of it was almost unbearable. She folded the letter and put it back in the coat pocket. Not because she had decided what to do with it, because she had no idea what to do with it. And until she did, it would stay where Anna had hidden it. A sound outside. Rose went to the window. In the fresh snow, she could see footprints. Someone had walked around the horse barn and left. The prints led northeast, toward Burch's property. Fresh prints, no snow cover, made within the hour. Someone was watching them. Rose pulled the curtain closed. Anna's curtain. And she stood in the dark, holding a dead woman's secret in a dead woman's coat, and wondered what in God's name she had gotten herself into. Rose Caldwell killed her father on a Thursday afternoon in August, in the middle of a surgery that should have been routine. And every time she picked up a scalpel, her hands remembered what her mind refused to forget. The emergency came without warning. Rose was checking on the pregnant mares as she did every morning when Delilah, the tall bay with the white blaze, the one Wyatt watched closest because she was carrying the foal that could be the crown jewel of his breeding program, went down. Not lying down to rest, went down, hard, with a groan that vibrated through the barn walls and made every other horse in the building go silent with that particular stillness animals show when one of their own is in trouble. Rose was in the stall in seconds, hands already moving. Delilah's belly was rigid, her breathing was labored, heart rate elevated. Rose palpated the abdomen, feeling for the foal's position, and her blood went cold. The foal had turned. Breech presentation. Hind legs where the head should be. If Delilah started pushing with the foal in this position, it could rupture her uterus, kill them both. Rose pulled her instrument bag from where she kept it hung on a nail outside the stall. She opened it on a clean towel and laid out her tools with the methodical precision her father had drilled into her. Then she reached for the largest instrument, and her hands began to shake. Not a little. Not the manageable tremor she had controlled during the abscess surgery. This was violent, both hands shaking so hard she could not hold the instrument steady. Because the foal needed to be turned manually, and manually meant reaching inside the mare and guiding the foal's body with her hands. And the last time she had put her hands inside a body to try to save a life, her father had died 3 days later. The memory crashed through her defenses like water through a broken dam. August, Boston. The small surgery her father kept behind their rented rooms. The table was a wooden door laid across 2 sawhorses. The light came from oil lamps that she had arranged around the table because her father could no longer sit up, and they could not afford a hospital. His leg was bad. The infection had reached bone. Osteomyelitis, if you wanted the proper term. She needed to debride the necrotic tissue, cut away the dead and dying flesh to give the living flesh a chance. She had done it twice before. Both times her hands had been steady. Both times her father had improved for a few weeks before the infection came back. This time she was tired. 3 nights of sitting beside his bed, monitoring his fever, changing his dressings. 3 nights without sleep. Her eyes burned. Her hands ached. But the surgery could not wait. The infection was spreading, and every hour of delay was an hour closer to sepsis and death. She cut, carefully, methodically, layer by layer. The scalpel was sharp. Her father's instruments were always sharp. He had taught her that a dull blade caused more damage than a keen one because you had to press harder, and you lost control. Her father's hand had seized her wrist, a spasm of pain. His fingers clamped down hard enough to bruise, and the scalpel jerked sideways, and she felt it bite into something it should not have bitten into. The femoral artery. The big one. The one that, once severed, bled with a force that was difficult to stop in a healthy person, and nearly impossible to stop in a man who was already dying. Blood. Everywhere. Pulsing red. Rose pressed her hands against the wound. Packed it. Pressed harder. Screamed for help that was not coming because it was a Thursday afternoon in a poor neighborhood and no one was home. Her father looked at her. His eyes were calm. Eyes calmer than hers. He knew what had happened. He was a veterinarian. He knew anatomy better than he knew his own name. "Not your fault, Rossi girl," he whispered. He bled for 3 days, weakening by the hour. Too frail for another surgery. Too far gone for the packing to hold. Rose sat beside him and watched, and could not do a single thing to stop it. Now she stood in a barn in Montana with blood on her hands that was not there, and a tremor that would not stop, and a mare that was going to die if she could not get control of herself. Wyatt was beside her. He had come running when he heard Delilah go down. He saw Rose's hands, saw her face, saw the distant, unfocused stare that meant she was somewhere else entirely. But this time he did not just speak. He put his hands over hers, his warm hands over her cold, trembling ones. "Guide me," he said. "Tell me what I am feeling." Rose blinked, looked at him. His gray eyes were steady and close and absolutely certain. Not certain that everything would be fine. Certain that he was here with her, and that was enough. She placed her hands over his, guided them to Delilah's belly. "Here," she said, "feel this. That is the hind quarters. We need to push here and turn here. The head needs to come around to this side." They worked together. 4 hands, his warm, hers cold, both pressing against the mare's belly with careful, coordinated force. Rose directed. Wyatt provided strength. They pushed the foal's haunches up, created space, brought the head around. 15 minutes, 20. Delilah groaned and thrashed, but Hank and Billy held her steady. Rose's arms burned, sweat dripped, but her hands had stopped shaking. Wyatt's warmth had anchored them somehow, had given them a steady point to return to when the tremor threatened. The foal turned. Rose felt it. The shift of a body inside a body. The head coming into position, the front legs extending. She sat back, gasping. It worked. The foal is in position. Delilah's breathing eased. The crisis was not over. She still needed to deliver, but the immediate danger had passed. Rose's coat was on the ground where she had thrown it. Anna's coat. The letter was in the pocket. Rose thought about it as she washed her hands. Wyatt was kneeling beside her, trusting her, opening his life to her, and she was hiding a letter that could destroy him. A letter that proved his dead wife had planned to leave him for the man who was now trying to take his ranch. Was she any different from Wyatt, who had hidden the truth about Anna's death? Both of them protecting people with incomplete truths. Both of them carrying secrets that weighed more than they could hold alone. They sat in the straw of Delilah's stall afterward. The mare had settled, her breathing even, the foal safely positioned. The crisis had drained them both. Rose's arms felt like dead weight. Wyatt's shirt was dark with sweat despite the cold. "You already knew about my father," Rose said quietly. "I told you in the field that night." "You told me a piece," Wyatt said. "I saw the rest today. In your hands." Silence. The barn was quiet except for the horses breathing and the occasional stamp of a hoof. "We are the same, Rose," Wyatt said, "both carrying ghosts in our fists." He reached across, brushed dried blood from her cheek. Horse blood, not human, but Rose flinched anyway. His hands stayed. His eyes asked a question. Rose leaned her face into his palm. The kiss was slow, careful, trembling. Neither of them was sure. Both of them were terrified. His mouth was warm, her lips were cold. The contrast was sharp enough to feel like electricity. He tasted like coffee and cold air, and something underneath that was just him. They did not pull away. They stayed in that moment, both of them choosing to remain when everything in their histories told them to run. When the kiss ended, they did not speak, just sat together in the straw, shoulders touching, breathing. Then Billy burst into the barn at a dead run. His face was white. "Boss, east fence is cut. The yearlings are running out. The fire started at 2 in the morning, the hour of deepest sleep, the hour when no one looks out windows." Clayton Burch always did know how to choose his moment. But before the fire came the stampede. 20 yearlings, the best of last year's foal crop, driven through cut fences by someone who knew exactly where the wire was weakest and exactly which direction to push the panicked animals. Northeast, toward a ravine 5 miles from the ranch. Rocky terrain, steep drops, the kind of landscape that killed horses in daylight and was a death sentence in the dark. They found the yearlings at dawn, scattered across the ravine like broken things. Some were standing, injured but alive, their breath making clouds in the morning air. Some were lying still. 4 were dead, necks broken from falls on the rocks, 16 alive. 8 sound enough that they might eventually be sold. The rest would need weeks or months of healing, if they healed at all. Rose worked through the day without stopping, suturing, splinting, cleaning wounds. Her hands did not shake. There was no time for shaking. There was only the next injury and the next and the next. A fractured cannon bone, lacerations deep enough to see muscle, a filly with a gash in her shoulder that took 30 stitches to close. Near the end, she sat beside a dead filly, the prettiest of the bunch, a little chestnut with a star on her forehead. Rose put her hand on the cold neck and stayed there, did not cry, just sat, grieving in the way she grieved, silently, completely, with her whole body still. Wyatt watched from a distance. He thought, she grieves for animals the way I grieve for people, without making a sound, as if the pain is too heavy for noise. That night they returned to the ranch exhausted beyond description. Every muscle ached. Their clothes were stiff with dried blood. Rose wanted nothing except sleep. She did not get it. The smoke smell woke Wyatt first. Not the comfortable wood smoke of a fireplace, but the sharp, acrid stink of structure fire. He was out of bed and at the window in 2 seconds. Orange light flickered through cracks in the yearling barn walls. Smoke poured from under the eaves. "Fire," he shouted, already running. Rose was right behind him. The yearling barn. The 8 recovered horses from the stampede, the ones they had spent all day saving, were inside. Wyatt's world narrowed to sound and heat and darkness. He wrapped his bandana around his mouth and plunged through the barn door into smoke so thick he could not see his hand in front of his face. The heat hit him like a wall. Somewhere in the blackness, the horses were screaming. He found them by sound, by touch. Grabbed halters and led 2 out blind, stumbling through smoke that burned his lungs with every breath. He went back in, because there were more, because he could hear them. The 3rd trip in, a ceiling beam cracked with a sound like a rifle shot. It fell across the aisle behind him. Sparks showered. His exit was blocked. Heat was building from every direction. He could not see, could not breathe. Then a hand grabbed his wrist in the dark. Small, strong, cold. Rose. She did not speak, just pulled. He followed. She had come in through the back entrance, soaked horse blankets in the water trough, came in low beneath the worst of the smoke. Smart, calculated, not reckless. They stumbled out the back door together, coughing so hard their bodies doubled over. The cold night air hit them, and the contrast was so extreme Rose fell to her knees. "I told you not to come in," Wyatt managed between coughs. And I told you I'm not a woman who takes orders, Rose managed back. Hank appeared from the smoke. Could you two argue about this later? The barn is still on fire. 7 yearlings saved, 1 lost to smoke. The barn was a total loss. Nothing left but smoking timbers and ash by dawn. Hank found the evidence in the wreckage. A silver pocket watch partially melted. He brought it to Wyatt. On the back, engraved initials, C.B. Wyatt opened it. Inside the case, behind the cracked crystal face, a small photograph. A woman's face. Dark hair. Quick smile. Anna. Clayton Burch had carried Anna's photograph against his chest for years. Had carried it while he set fire to Wyatt's barn. Had dropped it in the flames and left it there. Wyatt stared at the photograph, then looked at Rose. Said nothing. But Rose understood. This was never about land. This was never about railroads or money or business. This was about a man who had loved a woman and lost her, and decided that the man who took her deserved to lose everything too. Rose made a decision. A bad one, probably, but she made it. She rode to Clayton Burch's ranch alone, without telling Wyatt. She found Clayton on his porch. He did not seem surprised to see her. He looked tired. Not the tiredness of a sleepless night, but the deeper exhaustion of a man who has been fighting for so long he has forgotten what peace feels like. You are like her, Clayton said, coming here alone, but you are different too. You can survive that place. She could not, and I hated Wyatt for making her stay. Rose dismounted, stood at the bottom of the porch steps. You did not hate him for that. You hated him because she chose him. Clayton's jaw tightened. A long silence stretched between them. Rose's hand went to the coat pocket. The letter was there. She could feel the paper against her fingertips. She could end this right now. Show Clayton that Anna had chosen him, that she had been coming to him before the pregnancy changed everything. It would break the siege. But it would also weaponize a dead woman's most private confession. She left the letter in the pocket. Go home, Mrs. Thorne, Clayton said, and tell your husband I am not finished. Rose rode home, found Wyatt in the yard. His face was white. He knew where she had been, and the fear he could not name came out as the cruelest thing he had said to her since the day she arrived. Maybe Clayton is right. Maybe you should go. His voice was flat, deliberately cold. The voice of a man severing something before it could grow strong enough to hurt him when it broke. I will honor the agreement, he continued. Passage to Helena, $50. You can be gone by the end of the week. Rose stared at him. You do not mean that. I mean every word. This ranch is going under. Burch is going to take everything, and I will not have another woman die here because I was too stubborn to let go. There it was. The truth underneath the cruelty. Not anger. Terror. He was not pushing her away because he did not care. He was pushing her away because he was beginning to care too much. The same pattern that had killed Anna. Control the outcome by removing the person before the outcome could hurt them. Anna died because she could not live here, Rose said. Her voice was steady, quiet. I am not Anna, Wyatt. You do not know that. No, but you do not get to decide for me. You decided for Anna, whether to take her to town, whether she could survive the storm. You made that choice, and it destroyed you. And now you are making another choice for another woman. Has it not occurred to you that that is the pattern that needs to break? Silence. The fire's embers still glowing in the dark behind them. The smell of smoke and ruin. Wyatt had no answer. Rose walked past him into the house. Closed the door. Not slammed, which was somehow worse. The next morning a rider came from town. A clerk from the bank. Young and nervous. He handed Wyatt an envelope. Wyatt read it. His face went completely blank. The bank was calling in his operating loan. The one he used to buy feed and supplies through the winter. $1,200 due in 2 weeks, collateral compromised by the destroyed barn and scattered yearlings. Rose came downstairs. Wyatt handed her the letter without speaking. Their fingers did not touch. Again, she said, this time is different. His voice was rough, careful, an apology living underneath the words. This time I am not fighting alone. If you will still fight with me. Rose looked at him, saw the regret in his eyes, saw the fear still there but leashed now, held back by something stronger than fear. I am still here, she said. Am I not? Rose had $320 hidden in a tin box under her bed. It was her freedom money, the money to leave if everything collapsed. And this morning she was going to put every cent of it on the kitchen table. The 2 weeks that followed were the hardest Rose had ever worked in her life. She saw patients from before dawn until long past midnight, rode out to ranches 20 miles away, treated everything anyone brought her. The first case was a rancher's prize bull with an infected hoof. Rose worked cleanly, efficiently, hands steady. She accepted $50 in payment, rode home in daylight, ate supper. The second case came 4 days later. A dairy cow with milk fever at a homestead 12 miles south. Rose's hands were slower. She drank cold coffee in the saddle between stops, got home after dark, fell asleep at the kitchen table with her head on her arms. Wyatt carried her to bed. She did not wake. The third case, on day 12, nearly killed her. A foaling emergency 15 miles out. The foal was twisted. Rose worked for hours, got the foal positioned, delivered it alive, mother and baby both healthy. Then her vision went black, and she dropped like a stone. She woke 18 hours later in a stranger's bed. The rancher's wife sat beside her, kind-faced and worried. You collapsed from pure exhaustion. Doc Miller says you need 3 days rest, or you will do permanent damage. What day is it? Rose asked, already trying to sit up. March 14th. The loan was due tomorrow. Wyatt had come for her that morning, taken her instrument bag and her earnings, left word that she should rest and he would handle things. Rose dressed with shaking hands, borrowed a horse, rode home. Every mile was agony. Her body screamed for rest, but there was no rest to be had. Not yet. Tom Bradley arrived at the ranch the next morning with $900 in cash. I told you I owed you a life debt, he said. Betsy threw 2 healthy foals since you saved her, worth twice what I'm giving you. Consider this interest. Other ranchers came, having heard what happened. Smaller amounts, 50 here, 20 there. But it added up. Combined with what Rose had earned and what Wyatt had scraped together selling equipment and spare tack, and the wagon they rarely used, they had just over $900, 300 short. Rose went to her room, retrieved the tin box, brought it downstairs and set it on the kitchen table. $320, she said. Everything I have saved. Wyatt shook his head. That is yours, Rose. Your safety net. This ranch is my safety net. Rose pushed the box toward him. And it is not safety money anymore, because I do not want to leave. She did not say I love you. She said something harder. She said I am choosing to have no exit. I am choosing to trust this. To trust you. Even though every experience in my life has taught me that trusting people leads to losing them, I am choosing anyway. Wyatt took the money. But that night, after Rose had gone to bed, he sat at the kitchen table in the dark and wrote a letter. Rose, take the money. Go east. Find work. Build a life. You have the skill for it. I do not deserve what you are offering. I could not protect Anna. I cannot protect you. And I will not watch another woman. He stopped, stared at the unfinished word, the word he could not bring himself to write because writing it would make it real, and making it real would mean he had something to lose again. He put the letter on the table, went to the barn, sat alone in the dark with the horses breathing around him, and tried to convince himself he was doing the right thing. Tom Bradley found the letter. Tom had come by to check on them, saw the paper on the table, read it, and tore it in half. You are the greatest fool in Montana territory, Wyatt Thorne, Tom said when Wyatt came back inside. She deserves better than, Wyatt started. Better than what? Tom's voice was sharp. Better than a man who works 18 hours a day for his horses. A man who carried a frozen woman through a blizzard and nursed her back to life. Tom stopped, sat down on a kitchen chair, looked Wyatt in the eye. Listen to me. She is not betting on you. She is betting on herself. On her own skill, her own future, her own hands. You just happen to be standing in that future. Do not flatter yourself into thinking this is about you. She is not Anna, Wyatt, Tom continued, quieter now. Anna needed you. Rose does not need anyone. She is choosing you. There is a world of difference between needing and choosing. So stop being a damn martyr and go be worth choosing. Wyatt looked at the torn pieces of his letter, and something shifted inside him. The understanding hit like dawn breaking after a long night. Rose was not a woman who needed rescue. She was a woman who needed a partner, and partners did not run. He found Rose in the kitchen. She was standing by the window looking out at the dark. She had seen him writing, had watched him leave, had not read the letter, had been waiting to see what he would do. I almost ran, he said. I know. Rose did not turn around. I saw you writing. Silence. I was waiting to see if you would give it to me, she said. If you had, I would have torn it up in front of you. Wyatt crossed the kitchen, turned her around. She looked up at him and he saw everything in her eyes. The fear and the hope and the fierce, stubborn refusal to quit. That was as much a part of her as her cold hands and her steady scalpel. He smiled, a real smile, the first one Rose had seen, the first one he had felt in 3 years. It changed his whole face, erased the hard lines, made him look younger and lighter, and like a man who remembered what joy felt like. Rose thought, that face when he smiles. Now I understand why Anna chose him. The kiss was not gentle this time. It was desperate and certain, and it tasted like coffee and cold air and the end of pretending. His warm mouth on her cold lips, and the contrast was everything, the whole story of them, fire and ice meeting somewhere in the middle. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. When this is over, he said, when we have paid the loan and dealt with Burch, I am going to marry you again, properly, with vows that mean something. We are already married, Rose pointed out, not the way I want, not the way you deserve. They stood like that, forehead to forehead, breathing each other's air until the sound of boots on the porch broke the silence. Hank's voice through the door. Mrs. Thorne? Delilah is foaling. Breach. Again. Rose was moving before the last word landed. Instrument bag in hand, coat on, heading for the barn at a run, Wyatt right beside her. This time, Rose said, we do it together from the start. The foal was not breathing. Delilah had labored hard. The breech presentation for the second time, the foal stubbornly backwards, demanding the same coordinated effort from 4 hands that had saved it weeks before. Rose directed, Wyatt followed. They worked in the kind of wordless synchronization that comes from shared crisis, shared trust, shared fear of losing something precious. The foal turned, front legs extending, head positioning. Delilah pushed with everything she had. Once, twice. The foal slid free in a rush of fluid and membranes and lay motionless in the straw. Rose dropped to her knees. Her hands found the foal's chest. Small ribs. No movement. No heartbeat she could feel through the slick, wet skin. She cleared the nostrils, rubbed the rib cage with rough towels, vigorously the way her father had taught her. Stimulate circulation. Force the body to respond. Nothing. She blew into the foal's nostrils. Short, sharp breaths. Pressed on the rib cage. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. The memory was right there. Her hands on her father's chest. The same stillness. The same terrible silence where breath should have been. Life slipping through her fingers the way it always slipped through her fingers because her hands were the hands that killed what they touched. No, Rose said aloud. Not this time. She pressed harder. Blew again. Wyatt knelt beside her. He did not help because this was her fight, her battle with the ghost that had followed her from Boston to Montana. But he was there, his hand on her back, warm and steady and present. The foal's chest hitched, a tiny spasm. Nothing more. Rose pressed again. "Breathe," she whispered. "Breathe, damn you, breathe." The chest hitched again, harder this time. Then a full breath, the ribs expanding, the lungs filling. The foal's eyes opened, dark and wet and bewildered. Its head lifted from the straw. Rose sat back on her heels. Tears poured down her face. She did not wipe them, did not care who saw. Her hands, her cursed, blessed, complicated hands, had just brought something into the world instead of taking something out of it. Both things were true. Both things lived in the same pair of hands. And for the first time since that Thursday in August, Rose believed she could carry both truths without being crushed by either one. "You saved him," Wyatt said. "We saved him," Rose corrected. They watched the foal struggle to its feet. A colt, strong and perfectly formed, legs too long for his body, wobbling like a drunkard but determined. He found his mother, found the udder, began to nurse. "Hope," Rose said. "His name is Hope." Wyatt put his arm around her. She leaned into him, and they sat in the straw and watched life continue despite everything. Dawn came gray and cold, but the storm had passed. Rose changed her clothes, drank coffee standing up, and saddled a horse. She rode out before Wyatt could object. She visited every ranch she had served in the past 2 months, every family whose horse or cow or bull she had saved. She called in debts and asked for favors and accepted payment in cash and promissory notes, and one case a gold watch that she could trade in town for hard currency. By noon, she had $1,200. She walked into the bank 5 minutes before the deadline, laid the money on the bank president's desk. The thin man counted it twice, clearly hoping to find it short. The numbers added up. "This satisfies the debt," he said, sounding disappointed. "In writing," Rose said. "Now." She walked out of the bank with the satisfaction note in her pocket and the spring sun on her face. Clayton Burch was waiting on the boardwalk. He leaned against a post with his arms crossed, watching her the way a card player watches an opponent he has underestimated. "Well," he said, "did you bring my 800 for the mare?" Rose pulled the satisfaction note from her pocket and handed it to Wyatt, who stood beside her. She had not seen him arrive. He had followed her to town. "Loan is paid," she said. "Every cent. We do not owe the bank a thing." Clayton's smile vanished. "This is not over." Rose reached into her coat pocket. The letter. Anna's letter, carried against her body for weeks, weighing more than paper should be capable of weighing. "I found this in the lining of Anna's coat," she said. "I have been carrying it since the day I discovered it." She held the envelope out. Clayton looked at the handwriting on the front. His own name. In a hand he recognized. She saw the recognition hit him like a physical blow. His face changed. Every wall he had built, every mask he had worn, every calculation he had made, fell away in the space of a heartbeat. He took the letter. Read it. His hands shook. He read it again and again. When he looked up, his eyes were different. Not calculating, not cold, destroyed. "She was coming to me," he said, barely audible. "She was," Rose said. "She loved you. She was leaving Wyatt. But she discovered the pregnancy, and she stayed, not for him, for the baby. Not for—" Clayton looked at the letter for a long time. His throat worked. Rose watched a man process the knowledge that he had been loved after all, that the thing he had wanted most in the world had been reaching back for him, and that death had stolen it before it could arrive. He folded the letter carefully, slowly, with hands that would not stop shaking. He placed it inside his coat, against his chest, where the pocket watch had been. He did not surrender, did not apologize. But something in his posture changed. A war ending not with a bang, but with the quiet laying down of weapons that had become too heavy to carry. He mounted his horse. "Mr. Burch," Rose said. He paused. "She did not stay because she stopped loving you. She stayed because she was a mother. You should know the difference." Clayton looked at her for one more moment. Then he rode away. No threats, no promises, just the sound of hooves on muddy snow, and then silence. Rose had given up the letter, given up leverage, chosen mercy over power. It had cost her the only weapon she had. But some weapons are not worth the price of wielding them. Wyatt filed a complaint with the territorial marshal the next day. The pocket watch. Witnesses who had seen Burch near the property that night. The pattern of financial pressure. The marshal investigated. The evidence was circumstantial. Burch's family connections in the county made conviction unlikely. But the investigation made the eastern newspapers. Railroad investors reading about an arson scandal quietly withdrew their offer for the right-of-way. Without the railroad money, Burch could not service his own debts. His ranch went to auction by summer. Last anyone heard, he had left Montana Territory for California, with what little he could carry. Not justice, Rose thought. Consequences. 1 week later. Rose woke to sunlight. Real sunlight. Not the thin gray of storm season. Warm on her face through the window glass. She could hear water dripping from the eaves. The snow was melting. She dressed and came downstairs. Wyatt was at the kitchen table. 2 cups of coffee. Real coffee, not the chicory blend they had been rationing for weeks. He looked up when he heard her footsteps and smiled. The small smile, the one that was hers. "Real coffee," he said. "Luxury." Rose sat down, took the cup from his hands. Their fingers touched. His warm, hers cold. Neither pulled away. "Pastor Miller is in town this week," Wyatt said. "If you wanted, we could do it again. A real wedding, with vows that mean something." Rose sipped. "Hot and bitter and absolutely real. You owe me a ring. I owe you considerably more than a ring." "True. But start with the ring." Wyatt laughed. Rose laughed, and the sound of it filled the cabin in a way it had not been filled in years. Not because Rose was better than Anna, because she belonged here. Anna had not. That was not a tragedy. That was the truth. And the truth deserved to be told without apology. Through the window, Rose could see the hill behind the ranch. The snow had melted just enough to reveal the headstone. Anna's grave, small and gray against the brown earth. Rose did not feel jealousy. She felt gratitude. Because Anna had loved this man first, had taught him what love could look like even when the lesson came wrapped in grief. Anna had made Wyatt the man capable of writing an advertisement for a practical woman, and then waiting 3 months for a stranger to answer it. Of offering partnership instead of ownership. Of letting Rose prove her worth instead of demanding she prove her place. Rose would live the life Anna did not get to live. And she would live it well enough for both of them. Outside, Hope, Delilah's colt, ran across the thawing pasture on legs still too long for his body. He stumbled, went down hard on his knees in the mud, got up without hesitation, without fear, as if falling was simply part of learning to stand. Wyatt reached across the table and put his hand over hers, warm on cold, but closer to matching than they had ever been. "I waited 3 months for you, Rose. 3 months writing letters. 3 months imagining who you would be. You are nothing like what I expected." Disappointed, she asked. "No." His gray eyes held hers, warm as she had ever seen them. Warmer than fire. Warmer than any blizzard was cold. Better. Better than anything I dared to hope. Rose Caldwell Thorne, the woman who came to Montana with $9 and a pair of shaking hands, set down her coffee cup, took her husband's hand, and watched through the window as the foal fell again, and stood again and ran.